Hi, I'm Rajiv, and today we're going back to basics. Some milks for that beauty shop. There are some important things that you should know about washing dishes. There's a sequence. You should be thinking about water temperature, and if you saw my video on reseasoning a cast iron pan, the most important thing about keeping this healthy is how you wash it. So that's what we're doing today. We're cleaning up after a delicious breakfast. Let's get to work. So, you know when you go over to your friend's house for dinner and they cooked you a lovely meal, and just to pitch in, you offer to do the dishes and you insist on it, so you walk over to the sink and you have to navigate the system. What you're looking for is the implement that they use to clean the dishes. And we've all been there. We find the nasty, smelly, rancid kitchen sponge. The tool that you mainly use to wash the dishes is a very important thing to figure out with your own dishwashing system. Sponge, scrubby brush, dishcloth, steel wool. What do you use? Well, let me tell you that I've used all of these things over the years, and the best thing to use, the most effective thing to use, is a dishcloth. A dishcloth is something that can be used for one day, and then it can be left on the sink to dry overnight. And in the morning, you toss this in the laundry bin and you get a fresh one and you start over. If you do that, you prevent the whole moldy, smelly sponge situation that happens when this is just left on the counter damp. So that's my favorite thing to use, the dishcloth. I do have both of these things here. I use the sponge just for wiping up around the sink, and I use the scrubby brush when I absolutely have to, just to get into the crevices of certain things. But my main implement for washing the dishes is this right here, which Deborah specifically wove for me, and she did a few trial runs to figure out a weave structure that would actually be effective at scrubbing. And this is another one of those things that I just love. Deborah's dishcloths. I have about 15 of them, and they're on constant rotation. So now that we know what we're using, let's get to work. Let's start washing these dishes. What should the sequence be when washing dishes? Do you just take everything and put it in the sink and then just pick up whatever's closest and then wash that? No. Let's just talk this through. Am I going to take this greasy pan that has bacon grease in it and just stick it in the sink and turn on hot water and take my dishcloth and rub it around and then put this over here when the grease is kind of gone? And then the next thing I take is, let's see, maybe this glass over here, and take the same dishcloth and then just start washing it randomly? No, because if you do that, this dishcloth is full of grease. And now you have grease going onto this glass, which does not have grease on it. You end up using so much more soap, so much more hot water, and so much more time that you could have avoided if you just washed the glass first. So when I'm doing dishes, I start with the thing that's the most clean, and then I work my way to the dirtiest thing. I'm going to start, the very first thing I'm going to wash are all the glasses. And the last thing I'm going to clean are the dirty pans that are on the stove. The next thing that I think about is water temperature. We have cold water, we have hot water, and we have warm water. It does play a significant role in the efficiency of washing dishes. Remember this little bowl that I beat the eggs in? As soon as I beat the eggs and I put them in the pan, I brought this to the sink and I ran some water on it. But it wasn't just any old water, it was cold water. If I took this egg bowl that I whipped my eggs in and brought it over to the sink and just touched whatever part of the faucet I happened to touch and turned it on, and this water is hot, this hot water is now going into the bowl with raw egg residue. And what is it going to do? That hot water is going to cook the egg to the fork and to the bowl. Anything that has come in contact with eggs should be rinsed off or washed off in very cold water first. So I'm going to start with washing this glass in warm water. The other thing I like to do just to kind of make the water use more efficient is I put my dishes, the next set of dishes that I'm going to use, under the water stream. And because I rinsed this bowl and fork off with cold water to get the egg off, now I'm going over it with hot water. You might be hearing this and thinking, what? This is like college level dishwashing. I'm never going to remember all of this. And don't worry, you don't have to remember all of it, but if you just think about it, it'll start to sink in and it'll make sense. And then it'll just become second nature, whether you go for the hot water or the cold water. So now I have the plate. We start with the cold water to get rid of our egg. And look, our egg that's caked on there is going to come right off with cold water. That would not happen with hot water. And now, oatmeal. When you have an oatmeal dish or an oatmeal pan, hot water or cold water? Cold water. Putting hot water in the oatmeal pan is kind of like continuing to cook it, and it sticks to the pan. Putting cold water on it, you'd be amazed, it just pops right off. And look, now I have a pile of dishes that have been rinsed off in cold water and soap, and I can just quickly go over them with hot water. And for this, now I'd use the hottest water that my hands can tolerate, kind of sterilizing everything. And I don't have a dishwasher. I don't have a dishwasher because all of this silver is 200 years old, and most of the bowls and plates are at least 100 years old, and none of this stuff can go in the dishwasher. I also have this sink, this faucet and this sink that I absolutely love. And I like being here. I like doing dishes. There. Now, some hot water and soap for the egg spatula. Hot water just melts the grease away. So if you have stuff that you use for butter or anything that came in contact with that bacon grease, the hottest water possible and some soap. There. Dishes done. Pans. Let's find our oatmeal pan. Oh, look at this. It's gross. It's nasty. What are we going to do? Well, I'll tell you, if I put hot water on this, it would just become a bigger mess. But I'm going to run the cold water. You should really fill this with cold water as soon as you're done serving the oatmeal and let it sit there. But already, just from putting the cold water in there, look at this. It is coming right off. Okay, let's go back to our implement thing. Would I take this maybe and scrub this all around with this? You can, but then think about this. All that gunk and grime in the pot is going to end up in the bristles on this brush, and then this just becomes gross. And how do we get all that stuff out of here? Yeah, it'll come out of here eventually, but then all that stuff from here is going on to the next thing that you're washing. So I would not use this to scrub this out. Deborah's dishcloth, shocking, is very effective at scrubbing out the gunk. There, the pan is clean. Some hot water, finish it off. Oatmeal pan, done. Cast iron pan for the eggs. Look at how little egg is left on this pan. That's because this pan has been very well seasoned, and I maintain the seasoning. So, if you have one of these pans, if you've seasoned it, this is how to wash it. Cold water to get off the egg, because it's egg. No soap. No steel wool. All I'm using is the dishcloth and cold water, pressing with the dishcloth. That is clean. Now you might think, ew, it's gross, you didn't use any soap. You're not supposed to use soap on these pans. If you really are trying to build up a nice non-stick surface, avoid using soap. And if you're concerned about germs or anything that's left on this pan, the next time you use it, just leave it on the stove for a little longer before cooking, and that heat will just kill anything that's on it. If you were using your pan for eggs, maybe the first time you seasoned it, you might have a lot of eggs sticking to it. And if that happens, get one of these. You can get one of these little plastic scrapers that are specifically for cast iron pans. So what you would do is let the pan cool. Don't do this when it's hot. And if there's egg all over the pan, take the scraper and scrape as much of this off as you can and put it in the trash. Don't put it in your sink, that's gross. So scrape all of that off, put it in the trash, and then bring it over to the sink. And it might take a bit of elbow grease and a bit of time, but use cold water in your dishcloth to scrub away the remaining egg to get it all off, and then put it back on the stove, warm it up, and take a paper towel with some oil and just rub some oil back into the pan. You will see that sometimes when you wash pans, the shininess goes away and it becomes a little matte. If it's like that, it should get some oil, it should get some love. So when I'm done my dishes today, I'm gonna put this pan back on the stove, heat it up a little bit, and rub it with some grease, and just allow it to cool on the stove top with the stove turned off. And lastly, if you saw the video on how I restored this cast iron skillet, you'll know that it was in a sad state before I scrubbed it down, re-seasoned it, and brought it back to life. And if you want to amp up that seasoning process, use the pan for bacon. Use the pan for bacon a few times and it'll just speed things up. So what do you do now? You have your pan, it's full of bacon grease, and I've seen this before. I've seen people just take this and go over here and go like this. Please do not do that. Don't do that. Don't put this in dishwater. There's grease like spilling in this pan. So the way you deal with this is when it's like this, when it's at this point where there's still grease in the pan, get some paper towel and sop up the grease. Sop it all up and really get in there. And if there's stuff stuck to the pan, at this point, after you've sopped up the grease, and throw this in the trash, and give it to the dog, take your little scraper, don't give it to the dog, that was a joke, and scrape off any bits. There's not a lot on here, okay? And the way to wash this pan is in hot water. Because there's grease in this pan, you want hot water to melt the grease away. Cold water for eggs and oatmeal, hot water for greasy things. And if I'm using a dishcloth for something that was greasy, then the dishcloth is done for the day. It's gonna go from here into the laundry bin and I'll just get a fresh one. There we go. This pan is looking good. Oh, this is another thing. Cast iron, always dry it off. Do not leave it with any water in it because that water can find places to start rusting. I'm going to put these on the stove, turn the burners on, add a little grease to them just to bring them back to perfection, and then let them cool right there. And that is how you wash your dishes like a grown-up. What do you think? Is it doable? Are you going to remember all these little tricks? Please tell me in the comments below. And if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you didn't, use your dishwasher. Go ahead. I'm fine with it.